When appointed, principals take on academic and non-academic duties of a building. One of those non-academic duties is becoming the master scheduler of the building. This video will cover what it looks like when the principal is known as the master scheduler, how that schedule looks. This video covers mostly the high school space, but the general sense of scheduling can be used when talking about the middle school and elementary space. The interviews that were done for this video and information used is from Mr. Kevin Litterer, high school principal for East Sac County High School of 15 years, and Mrs. Amanda Miller, high school counselor for East Sac County High School, and will be taking on the role of principal at Coon Rapids Bayard within the next school year. Both have worked tirelessly to come up with schedules to help meet student needs, teacher needs, and all over building function. They have gone through consolidations and are working tirelessly on the closure of buildings and working to have more students in one building and what that looks like within the master schedule. There is much that goes into making a master schedule, so much more logistics than just plugging in classes and having students sign up for them. A brief overview of what we will talk about in this video is how times and list of classes are offered, what teachers prefer to teach. So for example, if there are 3 English teachers in one department, how would that look? How would each teacher take on a role within the department? It shows prep periods. So the master schedule is a great list of when a teacher is available and when it's not. Typically, teachers will display the schedule to show students when teachers are available to talk. Organizational tool to ensure all students are in a designated area, so making sure not all students are jammed into a study hall, but have a flexibility of classes they can take within a certain time frame. Master scheduling is much more than just plugging in. It is a very big logistical puzzle that must be taken into account, things like shared teachers within buildings. Other things that need to be taken into account is student numbers. Should 24 students be in one classroom? Is that a conducive learning environment? We also have to consider how teachers feel, because if teachers are not satisfied, then you're not guaranteeing that they may stay on for more years. And obviously, having teachers stay on is a big plus for principals. When talking to Mr. Litterer and Mrs. Miller, they both agreed that they are the first go-to people for a master schedule, and they begin discussing the schedule for the next school year months before the next school year begins. Parts of the frustration come from lack of interest with students when particular classes are offered. Therefore, some teachers feel as if their classes are not as important because they may not have many students. Another issue that has arisen is the idea that some teachers feel as if they have too much on their plate. So not only is the master schedule a logistical organizational tool, it's also used to help console teachers and make morale a much better place. But the realization is that administrators have to face the fact that not everybody is going to be satisfied, whether that be teacher or student. That is a frustration that was expressed between both Mrs. Miller and Mr. Litterer, but staying consistent and firm with their decisions has proved to work for them over the years. In this slide, we see an example of what a master schedule looks like. So in yellow, you'll see prep periods are highlighted to show that the teacher is not available during this time for teaching. However, students can come visit during this time. Teachers are free to use that period for however they need to. If you notice, if you look at Honish, so if we go scroll down here a little bit, so here's Mrs. Honish highlighted in yellow. You'll see that she has different highlighted colors. So the different highlighted colors indicate the type of class. Credit recovery is a class given to students to help gain more credits for classes they didn't pass in the past. This is given online. And then you'll notice she has a prep period and so on and so forth. If you look down at Mr. Schultz, at the very bottom of this page, you'll see that there are 4 blocks that are in orange. This indicates that Mr. Schultz is not in the building. He teaches an engine repair class that's through Iowa Central. So he is giving college credit, but he is not available through the whole day. So the master schedule also indicates when teachers are available. Many of the teachers within the high school and middle school space are shared teachers, so it's very important that they are given a travel time. In this spot here in that purple, it shows that they are given that travel time to travel from the middle school to the high school or from the high school to the middle school. So the master schedule is a really good place to show where teachers are at all times. A high school principal has so much on his or her plate that it is almost impossible to have this schedule memorized on the very first day of school. So while getting into routine, this is a very good template so that the principal knows when and if a teacher is available. Another great tool for this is that principals and teachers can coordinate meeting times during their prep period or before or after school, whatever works best for the teacher. But generally, prep periods are a good meeting time to talk about evaluations, to talk about any source of issues between teacher and principal or between student, teacher, any kind of relationship that there is. How the master schedule is made. Mr. Litterer has spoken very highly of Mrs. Miller, the school counselor. He has stated that many times the school counselor knows a lot more about the schedule than the high school principal, and the principal oversees the decisions made. He has explained that things like JMC, which is our management system to put student enrollment in, is used quite a bit with Mrs. Miller. Mrs. Miller has explained that JMC does not see many of the issues that we see on a personal level. For example, if we plug in certain classes, let's say art design, if we plug in that into JMC and tell students they can take it any period, JMC will put a student into whatever period they fit. The problem with that is that our art teacher between the high school and middle school has been shared. So JMC doesn't consider that. So Mrs. Miller has to go in and manually move students to make sure that they are in a class when a teacher is present. Other things to consider when the schedule is made is class size and number of sections. The high school science teacher, when she teaches biology, she's only available for 3 biology periods. There's only 1 high school biology teacher. While there are 2 for the department, the other person in the science department teaches all freshmen. So he has no time in his schedule to teach the biology sections. So that's a huge consideration when we're talking about putting students in biology. This teacher also has 2 sections of chemistry and an anatomy class. So how do we make the sections manageable while maintaining curriculum? That is a huge issue that many counselors have to go through. Mr. Litterer oversees that teachers are comfortable and he manages that portion, but he also has to make sure that his high school counselor is efficiently doing her job. Other things to consider: shared teachers. Like I explained, there are various elective shared teachers, so they are not in the building at certain periods of time. So when this master schedule is made, the first thing that's blocked out are our teacher times that they are traveling, that they are not in the building. Typically, shared teachers are in the high school space between periods 1 and 5. During 6th period, they are traveling, and then 7th and 8th, they are available in the middle school. This alleviates the idea of the morning time frames where students are just shuffling around. They are more likely to be in elective classes. During the end of the day, you'll more likely see students within a study hall or in a core class, such as biology or math or PE. So more likely the core classes are given at the end of the day, since those teachers are in the building at the all day versus the elective teachers that are in the shared buildings. Time of day is a huge consideration. Many teachers have expressed that students are not typically awake within the 8:15 time frame, so we try to offer a little bit more of a elective class to get the kids rolling so they are ready to go when it comes to a little bit more of a rigorous class. Student interest is a huge factor that drives the master schedule. Many students have expressed their want for a class, but if there's only 1 student that wants that class versus 20 students that want that class, that goes into consideration for actually forming the class. As a district, ESAC is very lucky because they've partnered with Iowa Central to create online classes. So many times when students show an interest in something that's not offered at our school, rather than completely create a new class and having a teacher create a new prep, they take the online version that is offered through the high school. That partnership has showed a lot of faith within the student and the college. It also shows that students are interested in college credit and interested in other things offered at a small rural high school. While talking to Mr. Litterer and Mrs. Miller, they both have talked about the time frame for a schedule. Typically, Mrs. Miller sends out an email to all teachers asking for things like what they prefer class sizes, what classes they are intending to teach once again for the next school year. And she asked for that information in January. Once January rolls around, she begins to make a master schedule for the next school year. So by February timeframe, she wants her first draft presented. The things that are considered are things like if a teacher would like a prep period changed, if a teacher is no longer teaching a subject for the following school year, how endorsements work. So for example, if a teacher decided they don't want an endorsement in chemistry anymore and that's been dropped, what does that look like for the department? Those are many things that are considered. Many times counselors do try to satisfy teacher needs, but it is obvious that that can't always happen, and so teachers must accommodate. This is where the high school principal comes in to help manage that role between counselor and teacher. The counselor's position is not to satisfy teachers. It is the principal's position to manage the relationship and to inform teachers that they cannot always have everything they want. He or she must inform them in a safe space. That way teachers don't feel as if they are being brushed aside, but the counselor must depend on the principal to manage that entire relationship. That is one difficult factor within scheduling that the principal and counselor go through because of the fact that they can't always be a friend to everybody. Changes can and will continue to be made until the beginning of the next school year. So for example, Mrs. Miller has expressed that she starts with one draft in February. That draft may look completely different in May when she tries to finalize all the changes. Typically, the schedule should be done by May by the time teachers leave, so they have an idea of what is going on. But this year, obviously COVID-19 has rocked the boat a little bit. The schedule for next school year is a little hazy. We are also going through a counselor change since Mrs. Miller will be leaving this school year. So the schedule for next school year can look and probably will look completely different. But like I said, teachers should have an idea of what they're teaching for the next school year. All the students for next school year should be in JMC by this time, so you know what your classes and your class sizes look like during the summertime. Summertime is a great time to decompress. It is also a good time to prepare for what those classes look like. The master schedule team. The first person that is always checked with is Mr. Litterer, which is the high school principal. High school principals are the entire team, basically. So the high school principal determines the needs and wants of the building, and the counselor oversees how that is done. So for example, if the principal doesn't feel a class has too much interest, he can say that we're not going to give that class, and the counselor has to follow those suits. But with that, you also need students and teachers to help put their input to help determine the decisions from the principal. So all are a part of this team. It is not just the principal deciding and dictating what and will happen. Many times the wants and needs are driven by teacher and students. Counselors plug in that information, principals push the drive. Like with any process in logistics, there are always conflicts. Things that we consider conflicts would be student interest. I have already explained that many times students will show an interest. For 1 year, you'll see 5 students that are interested in taking a music history class, a class that's never been offered. So how do you do that and give time for the band instructor to give her lessons and everything else, while not overwhelming her and telling her, hey, you have to have this schedule done right now? So that is one thing to consider. Required versus elective classes is another conflict because of the shared teachers within the high school. Many times required classes are given throughout the end of the day, so along periods 5 through 8. That gives those elective classes that are shared priority within the morning. That way teachers have a good amount of students in their classrooms. Teacher numbers. Many times you'll see that in small rural high schools, you have one teacher that teaches one subject, and that could be a required class. For example, high school biology is a required class. There's only one teacher to teach that. If a student wants to take band, choir, and some other course, they may find that they can't take chemistry because chemistry is only offered certain periods of the day. So there is an example of this. A student wanted to take a college level class, computer science class, and what he found was that those classes were offered at the end of the day at Iowa Central during periods 6 through 8. He had to drive to that course. That was an approved course from the school, but he found that he also wanted to take choir and band, which is offered first and second period. Mr. Litterer has showed that those two classes do have that priority within first and second period. Now, the student also wanted to take chemistry. Chemistry is only offered periods 2 and 7. How do we alleviate that one very unique situation? The student opted to not take chemistry for this school year and is considering taking online chemistry for the next school year to satisfy his want to take chemistry, but also have that drive to take the computer science class along with keeping up with the humanities courses he wanted. So very unique conflicts will come out of scheduling, and many times there are conversations that are happening between parent or guardian, counselor, and principal. And if there is a huge conflict that cannot be resolved, the student may have to wait for the next school year to take this course. Student numbers is another factor. Many teachers find that having more than 25 kids in a class can be very daunting. So the class numbers has been tried to cap at 20. There have been sections that have been added, but 20 is a good number for teachers, especially if there are many issues within a class. You'll find that a lot of times students with IEPs or any kind of need will be put into a similar class with their aides, and that can be a little challenging for the teachers. So we want to maintain those numbers and keep them at a good number rate. However, there are times where teachers just have to have a bigger section, and that's just what it is. Communication is key in the entire process of making the master schedule. Parents and guardians must be kept in the know of what classes their students are taking or their kids are taking. For example, there was a student in the past years that has told their parents they are taking very high level classes, and when it came down to the truth, the student was not taking things like anatomy, chemistry, pre-calc, and calculus. The student was lying to their parents, but the counselor has required a parent signature, and parents have the ability to log into JMC to see the courses their students are taking. The student was not very happy when the communication from the school to the parent was given, but that is a relationship that must be maintained. Parents must trust that we are offering all of these courses and recommending these courses to be taken, and not just leaving up the decisions. The parent and the student had their conversation and things were remedied, but communication is a key factor. Other things that are communicated are the need to take remedial classes and what that looks like for the parent or teacher. Are students on track to graduate with the schedule offered? If we have a schedule that it is impossible for a student to meet all the graduation requirements, then we are not communicating our schedule well enough. We are not communicating to our students well enough. We have a track for what students should take. We also have programs. Mrs. Miller has established I have a plan website that, it's through Iowa State, and it is given to students to have a 4-year plan. So Mrs. Miller tracks the 4-year plans and tracks what students' graduation credits look like, and will that work with the next school year's schedule. So Mr. Litterer has to make sure that all students are on a track to graduate, that therefore the graduation rate numbers are not low. Principal, counselors, students, and teachers must all maintain transparency to meet all needs. So principals and counselors should not be trying to manipulate the schedule and not talking about that with teachers. Teachers should not be so inflexible that they're not willing to offer classes during certain time frames. They should not be stagnant and not being able to change their prep period or whatever the case may be. Unfortunately, my reference are not on this page, and I'm not sure why. I will have to go back through and attach that.